4 threats. That's going to be the winds, damaging winds, which is why we have the Saffir-Simpson wind scale. That's how we categorize these storms. A storm surge, which is when that ocean level rises and those waves and currents are so destructive. That's traditionally been the most deadly component. We've got freshwater flooding, which is in recent years has become very deadly. Folks here in the Houston area, of course, know all about freshwater flooding from Harvey, where it just rains so much. And then tornadoes is that 4th threat, which is a little bit more of difficult to predict where and when those will happen. Those other threats are fairly predictable, something that we have confidence in saying, and this much of a storm surge is expected here, and this much rainfall is expected here. The numbers can vary, of course, but the tornado ones, you can get kind of a region, but you can't pick out when and exactly where the paths would be or anything along those lines. So already beginning to see some of those threats. And I will point out that we have a 5th threat that hurricane brings as well, and that's the aftermath threat, when we see people that die because of mistakes that are made as far as power lines being down, misuse of generators with the carbon monoxide poisoning, when there's other just sort of threats that take place after the storm has already made its landfall. And a lot of that can be prevented, and we hope that those folks in Florida are kind of moving through that. Let's jump into the graphics and talk a little bit about what we're seeing right now with Milton. You'll notice that that very distinct eye of the storm has sort of gone away within the last several hours. Clouds have kind of begun to cloud over that just a little bit, and that's going to help to keep the storm from strengthening. I'll go ahead and say it will help it to weaken, but I don't expect a large weakening to take place. We're so close to this landfall, we're probably looking at maybe 12, 16 hours at the most from when the eye will make its landfall across the west coast of Florida. You can see how it's losing some of its symmetry, meaning that it's not as balanced of a storm. You've got more activity on the east side or the right side of the eye, or where you would see the eye. Over on the left side, it's just less rain and clouds. That's drier air that's actually getting pulled into the storm. That is good news. That is something positive to report, is that this decay, this weakening that was always been expected, is beginning, and we're hopeful that it'll just increase even more and more, but we're not as optimistic that a dramatic weakening will be taking place. It'll still be right at that Category 3, Category 4 strength when it makes its landfall. So here's that, we'll switch and we'll see if we can get an official look here at that forecast track. The 11 a.m. update that they issued has 145 mile an hour winds sustained. We've got that movement happening, moving to the northeast now at around 17 miles an hour, and that pressure is holding at about 131. So you'll notice things have sped up just a little bit. Before, when we were talking from a 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. landfall, it does look like this is pushed up probably at least around midnight, if even several hours earlier, when that eye will actually make its landfall. But the impacts will certainly be felt. Here we're pausing at around 10:30 p.m. and you can see definitely major impacts happening as that storm is beginning to have hurricane force winds across it. As it moves across the peninsula, it will weaken quite a bit. Moving, interacting with land always will make that happen. And we get to Thursday morning, by lunch, this is going to be back out, at least the eye, back out over water. Now, while I've got just a moment here and you can see that yellow cone that's drawn in there a little bit, I want to remind everybody, especially if we happen to have someone in Florida who's watching, that that yellow cone does not represent impacts. That's not showing us where the threats are going to be happening. That cone is strictly a forecast cone, and it's just telling us where we think the very center of Milton will be, with confidence in that yellow shading, and most likely close along that center line right there. So the threats, the storm surge, the winds, the tornadoes, the flooding rains, that's all happening well outside of that yellow shading. So just a reminder of that. And we can see that a little clearer here with our wind field that is expected. That yellow outside ring there representing tropical storm force winds, basically 60 mile an hour to hurricane force winds in the orange. And then there's a tighter circle there. We can see that closer when we zoom in. That red area right around the hurricane icon there, that represents the hurricane force winds. And so still, when we get to Thursday morning around sunrise, we'll have Milton in the middle of Florida with hurricane force winds, most likely at Category 3 strength. So a major hurricane across Florida, and that's going to weaken eventually as it gets out to the Atlantic. Here are the watches and warnings. Again, I mentioned this is much wider than the cone. The red, that hurricane warning, that's basically just the winds that's a threat, and then also the blue there representing the tropical storm winds that are expected. Here's that rainfall expectations. You'll notice that the worst of the rainfall not happening where the landfall is near Sarasota or Tampa Bay, but the worst of the rainfall will be happening up and around Daytona Beach and down to the Orlando area, and maybe even up towards Jacksonville just a little bit. So that storm surge is when that wall of water gets pushed up and makes its way into land, and that is something that is going to be a huge, huge threat overall. So we're looking at just running out of time quite quickly for the Florida coast, and those mandatory evacuation orders have already been in place. Most of that directly because of the storm surge. 6 million people in 11 counties. Tampa Bay hasn't taken a direct hit in more than a century, and Tampa's mayor warning that a 15-foot storm surge, which is forecast possibly, could even swallow a whole house.
We're very scared. We don't know what to expect, and we don't know when to come back home.
I've been through it before. You learn from them. Yeah. And I have over the years.
All right, officials have warned that anyone staying behind must fend for themselves because the first responders won't be able to risk their own lives attempting to rescue during the height of the storm. Take a look at this time lapse of Hurricane Milton as one of the astronauts on the International Space Station captured the size of this storm from space. It's a large storm. It's one of the strongest, of course, that we've had for many years here in the Gulf of Mexico. And the NOAA hurricane hunters that have been flying in have had a very bumpy ride into Hurricane Milton yesterday. I'm going to give you a chance to watch these guys bounce around just a little bit. They, of course, are the ones that are collecting that so important data from the middle of the storm that helps create the forecast as well as research projects, and those guys had a very rough ride overall as they moved into the storm. I want to go ahead and jump forward a little bit, if we can, Bradley, and look at this interview that Allison Gargaro had a chance to talk with one of the reporters, Walter Allen. We have a sister station in Orlando as well as Tampa, and she had a chance this morning to talk about that Milton landfall.
Walter, I want to get a look at what you are monitoring at this time. As we bring your audio up, we can hear some of those rain bands. The latest model has this making landfall as a Category 4, but it's going to be all about that catastrophic storm surge along your coast.
That's exactly it. That's what the warning is. In fact, if you guys saw on social media, Tampa Mayor Jane Castor said, if you stay in the evacuation zone, zones A and B, and you choose to stay, you will die. And she meant that for a fact, really, to drive the point home. We're talking about 10 to 15 foot storm surge. Here is the door into our Fox 13 studio here, just to show you that is one floor. That's 10 feet. So a story and a half. You're talking about storm surge. That you can't survive that type of storm surge. Again, possible Category 4, strong Category 3 that is expected to make landfall at some point tonight or early tomorrow morning. It looks like tomorrow morning at about 2 o'clock in the morning. We have seen catastrophic storm surge in the past, not in this area. Texas, you guys know all about it. Hurricane Ike, that was back in 2008. 20 feet of storm surge, and that made 25 miles inland. So that is the last devastating storm surge, and something they're possibly preparing for here in the Bay Area. It looks like the eye is going to make landfall south of us, about 15 to 20 miles south of us. But you know that cone of uncertainty, if it were to jog just to the north, we can certainly see some of the worst of the storm surge. Now, the evacuations have been ongoing for multiple counties, all up and down our coastline. Hillsborough, Pasco, Pinellas, Manatee, Sarasota counties, multiple zones within those counties. So you're talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people being evacuated out of the area. Now, every storm has its own really personality. Some storms are rain events, some are wind, other storm surge. You got to remember, we're cleaning up from Hurricane Helene, so that was a storm surge event. So now we kind of have all three. We're checking all of the boxes. Heavy winds, a lot of rain, and storm surge. And we have a lot of debris, people's belongings, building materials, debris from Hurricane Helene that's been stacked up in front of homes. So the race is on to get that picked up so it doesn't turn into projectiles and fly against other people's homes or clog up sewers and drains. Crews have been working nonstop through the night to get everything picked up. That includes police escorts to and from dump sites. In fact, I think I heard from Mayor Jane Castor that about 75% of the city of Tampa debris has already been picked up. But again, sometime this afternoon, that will stop at some point this afternoon. Talking about travel, a lot of the airports are closed already. Tampa International, that closed at 9 yesterday morning. St. Pete Clearwater International Airport, that is also closed. Orlando Airport, that is closing at 8 o'clock this morning. When you have a lot of water, you're talking about a lot of bridges in our area. So the big three, Courtney Campbell Causeway, the Howard Franklin, and the Gandy bridges, those are all expected to close this afternoon. And when the winds get high, about 40 miles per hour or higher, sustained winds, then the Sunshine Skyway Bridge connecting Manatee County to Pinellas County, that will also close. You probably have seen some of the videos of the gas stations that are without fuel. There's not a fuel shortage. It is actually at the port, but there are just not enough trucks to get it out fast enough for the demand. There's just so many people trying to get gas all at the same time to try to evacuate out of here. So it's been a challenge trying to get gas to these gas stations. Now, all across the Bay Area, businesses have been boarding up in preparation of this hurricane. This is footage that was actually taken at a restaurant just down the street from us off of Kennedy Boulevard. The businesses are sharing messages of support for the community, writing Tampa Strong, thanking locals for their support, and finishing signs off with their hearts. There have been other signs that have expletives telling Milton to go away. Of course, I cannot share that on TV. But I will say, you guys mentioned the Waffle House. Some of those are closed in our area. So you have Waffle Houses closing. You also have Jim Cantori sightings. So you know you're in the bullseye of a major storm. Allison?
And Walter, I mean, we see this time and time again with these tropical systems, down trees, down power lines, widespread power outages. So, you know, hopefully folks are charging their devices now so that they can watch you guys on the air. Unfortunately, when the power will likely go out a bit later tonight and tomorrow.
Yeah, that's for sure. And the response from linemen, obviously we sent some of our linemen to the Carolinas to help out with that recovery effort. We have actually pulled them back. And Tampa Electric, they actually have a response of about 5,000 linemen on standby, which is historic. We have never had that before. And a lot of linemen are staging at Tropicana Field. You might have seen on social media, a lot of cots are in the actual field area where the Tampa Bay Rays play baseball. They are there waiting, along with the National Guard, ready to deploy whenever the storm moves through, guys.
Well, thank you so much, Walter Allen, with our sister station in Tampa. Please stay safe. We appreciate your reporting this morning.
Thank you.
Fox 26 is 26 YouTube page. Like and subscribe today.
All right, welcome back to Forecasting with Friends. I want to get right out live to Florida. I've never met Connor Hansen personally, but Connor, I'm glad you're here. I'm going to call you my friend today because I'm concerned for you. I'm thinking about you. Tell me what's the latest going on there in Tampa Bay area.
Well, JD, of course, I appreciate that. Just now we're hearing some sort of alarm blaring here in downtown Tampa as we continue to see these strong bands of wind and rain really build up. This storm expected to make landfall just about 12 hours from now, and it's less than 200 miles from Tampa Bay right now, already causing some serious problems in South Florida, tornadoes. People here in Tampa waiting anxiously to see where exactly this storm is going to hit.
I tell you, it seems like this 10 a.m. update from the Hurricane Center has sped things up a little bit. Have you sensed any sort of tension or even higher stress levels with the fact that it's maybe even closer than what we thought it was going to be?
Most definitely, and thankfully we're not seeing a whole lot of people out here, so hopefully most people who are in those mandatory evacuation zones have gotten out of here, and if they're not, they at least hunkered down. You know, Tampa has some areas that you definitely should leave and some that you're probably okay, but it might be a little bit dicey. If you go a little bit further out to the Gulf and places like Clearwater, some of the barrier islands, they told people you have to leave because first responders just aren't going to be able to get out there until this storm has passed. So anticipating a dangerous situation, especially depending on where exactly the eye wall of the storm hits and where that strongest wind and storm surge, because we're talking a possible 15-foot storm surge. If you imagine this waterfront behind me, 15 feet higher, where I'm standing right now, it could be underwater.
And I'm glad you mentioned all those threats, the storm surge and the winds. There's been a lot of talk about all the Helene debris that was still out and about. Have you seen a progress in that? Has there been cleanup that's been able to take place in this short amount of time?
Yeah, and it's really hard to believe it's only been 2 weeks since Hurricane Helene passed by, and that destroyed some people's homes here on the water due to the flooding. But so many people had to bring their debris out to the street from all over the place. There was a huge effort to clean that up. We're talking about thousands of pounds of that debris. Unfortunately, it doesn't sound like all of it was able to be cleaned up, so there are warnings about that floating debris, especially once we see hurricane force winds again. That will turn into projectiles. So officials here are telling people if it's outside your home, just do your best to lock it down because that's going to go flying.
All right, Connor, I know we're running out of time. I'd love to talk with you a lot more, to be honest. Thanks for making time for us. I do have one more question. This is a little bit more of a casual show here, and we just sort of want to know kind of the behind the scenes a little bit side of things. Tell me how are you going to stay safe tonight? What are your plans to make sure that you're going to be able to talk to us tomorrow morning?
Well, I hope it'll ease your mind, JD, to know that we're not planning to stand exactly right here tomorrow morning during the thick of it. We'll be moving to a much safer location, a little bit more elevated, as long as we can stay there safely during the storm. Of course, if things get too dangerous, we'll have to pull back, but we plan to be here with you throughout all that. I hope we get the chance to talk again during that storm and after the storm, but we could be in for quite the night here and into early tomorrow morning.
All right, Connor Hansen's in the Tampa Bay area, and I believe we get to talk to you again during our noon newscast. So we'll plan to talk to you then. Otherwise, make sure you're staying safe over the next 24 hours.
All right, thanks, JD. Looking forward to it.
All right, that's going to give us the latest there from Connor Hansen again in the Tampa Bay area. We'll have a couple more things to say about Milton right after this break.
Fox 26 is
Anonymous.
The Fox 26 YouTube page. Like and subscribe today.
Well, this morning we're joining you from Clearwater, Florida, taking cover from the rain under a gas station that sits just after you get off a bridge heading into Clearwater. And this is what a lot of these businesses miles from the ocean look like. Boarded up, sandbags on the ground, and the pumps that we're standing next to actually are completely sealed as well. That's been a huge issue around here, is gas just running out with how many people we're trying to fill up and evacuate in time before Milton's landfall. This is actually a look at the final hours of preparations across Pinellas County for Milton last night. It was an eerie sight as all businesses in zones A, B, and C were ordered to close by this morning. Even grocery stores like Florida's popular Publix are not open. While thousands upon thousands of residents have heated evacuation warnings, some, like Brian Perrette, were still trying to get last-minute things done, and he had a last-minute change of plans. He was planning on riding out the storm at a co-working space in downtown St. Petersburg, but because a few large cranes downtown can't be secured ahead of Milton's landfall, he says the fire department told them they had to leave.
My plan was to bring me and my dogs here and ride the storm out. Now I got to have a plan to ride the storm out back at home. We've got buildings that are over 100 years old. They've never seen this kind of wind. They've never seen this kind of rain, and it's coming.
At this point, it's a race against the clock for people to get out of these coastal communities, and options are still available as far as places for them to go. Pinellas County has opened additional shelters in Clearwater and St. Pete. They now have 10 total emergency shelters opened, and last night officials told us that more than 5,000 people were taking advantage. We know the local bus service is offering free rides to shelters 24/7 until conditions become unsafe for them to be on the road. And we also know Uber has a special code that people can use to get a free ride to those shelters also. In Pinellas County, the barrier islands especially took the brunt of devastation from Hurricane Helene. The sheriff actually cut off access to everybody as of 7 o'clock last night. And right now, people are taking advantage of the big Tampa Bay area bridges still being open because those are expected to close later this afternoon. For now, I'm Regina Gonzalez reporting in Clearwater for Fox 13. We'll send it back to you.
All right, thank you, Regina. That's a fantastic report there as the final preps are on, and we're already beginning to see some of the impacts, the tropical impacts from Hurricane Milton. They're minimal right now, but they're certainly going to be ramping up throughout the day before the actual hurricane force winds reach there, along with that deadly storm surge. And we've already begun to see tornadoes happening that are directly related to Milton. The tornadoes have been happening much further to the south in the Florida Peninsula area. They're not happening really right where we're expecting this landfall to take place. But as I show you our forecast cone, again, I'm going to stress and remind you that this yellow shaded area is not impacts. It's not saying where the winds are going to be or where we're going to see the storm surge. It's talking about where will the center of this storm be tracking? Where will the forecast take the storm? All the other threats that'll be going along with it will be happening later. So we are looking at this landfall, the very center of the eye that we're focused on, that happening more in the 10 p.m. to midnight time range. And that's a little bit earlier on than what we've been talking about. The speed now, as you'll notice on this update, has increased to about 17 miles an hour to the northeast. Those sustained winds currently is 145. I'm not sure if I had a chance to mention that, but 145 on the current sustained winds. Still looking at borderline Category 3 to Category 4 at landfall. We'll have more news coming up at Fox 26 News at noon.
I sleep better than I have in years.
I wake up feeling like I've had the best night's sleep.
Stop being afraid and start sleeping your fears away with Relaxium Sleep. Your body and your mind will thank you.
Mike Huckabee is so confident that Relaxium will work for you, he's asked us to give away 1,000 bottles.
If you're not getting calm enough to go to sleep, take Relaxium Sleep. I promise you it'll work.
Get your risk-free bottle of Relaxium Sleep now. It's guaranteed to work or your money back. Visit TryRelax.
Seven.
A local emergency currently exists. Quickly secure your home or business and safely evacuate the area.
We're expecting winds of over 100 miles per hour, winds we did not receive with Hurricane Helene. This is an incredibly powerful storm, and we all need to take it seriously.
We're going to experience some historic, life-threatening storm surge.
You still have today to get out of those storm surge evacuation zones. Remember, you only have to travel tens of miles, not hundreds of miles, to get to a safe location.
Now's the time to execute your plan, but that time is running out.
And welcome back to Fox Weather, everybody. I'm here in Cocoa Beach, Florida, along the Space Coast, just south of Cape Canaveral. If you're familiar with the area, it appears that the core of the storm, once it makes landfall on the west side of Florida, somewhere basically south of Tampa or very close to Sarasota, around that neighborhood, we're still not exactly sure where the core is going to come in. It's going to impact millions of people. It's going to go through the Orlando area with heavy rain, lots of wind, and then it's going to enter right across the Space Coast here by tomorrow morning or early in the afternoon. Right now, Nick, I want to bring you in. Nick Koster up there in New York City. We had some very heavy rain about an hour ago. It's loosened up. We haven't seen showers here in about an hour or so. But now that the sand's starting to dry out a little bit and the wind has picked up, gusting 20 to 30 at my back, getting a little sand blasted out here, sitting on the beach. So we're definitely feeling some of the effects right now with that easterly wind, and it's been gusty. Nick.
Yeah, and I read something that the National Hurricane Center put out. They said in one of their earlier discussions, Milton has the potential to be one of the most destructive hurricanes on record for west central Florida. And that sums it up. I mean, you can't really say it any better. Those are strong words coming from the National Hurricane Center, which doesn't typically use verbiage like that. And, honestly, right. I think they said it best. Them and the Tampa mayor, it's just like, why not be frank and let people know exactly what's coming? And this storm is likely going to be retired. Milton actually replaced Hurricane Michael, which was retired. So something about these M storms here. And
Michael is the 6-year anniversary tomorrow, on the 10th. I was there for that one in the Panhandle of Florida. Yeah,
Mother Nature she's interesting. Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and get the very latest from our hurricane specialist here at Fox Weather, Brian Norcross. He's got the very latest on what's going on with Milton. Brian, we still anticipate a landfall as a Category 4 storm sometime within the 2 a.m. range overnight into tomorrow morning. What are you seeing right now?
Well, doing a little calculation, Nick, it's about 10 and a half hours away, but it is forecast to slow down. And I want to be sure that everybody in the Tampa Bay area pays really close attention here, because if you look at the track, you can see that it wobbles to the right and it wobbles to the left and it wobbles back to the right. And we expect that with any kind of a hurricane, and especially a hurricane that's being impinged on the backside by upper level winds and dry air, and it's kind of disrupting it. So it's like having a top spinning, and then you flick the top and it goes like this a bit. So the point is that it's aimed directly at Tampa Bay now. It is forecast to make a bit of a turn at some point, but Tampa Bay is within the wobble. And there is no question that the Tampa Bay metropolitan area will get the northern eye wall, which will be the most intense part of the hurricane at landfall based on everything that we know. So if it's not the huge storm surge at the beach, it's going to be storm surge in the bay. It's going to be damaging winds. There are a lot to come with this storm, even in the Tampa Bay area, let alone down the coast that we all are so familiar with. Here you can see what's happening. Look at the side of the storm eroding here as dry air is pushed in here on the backside. But this combination of dry air and this upper level jet stream that's pushing in is what's making this extreme weather outside of the core. So we have the core, and you can see the core on the radar. It's kind of a croissant shaped thing, and that's going to be the trend. We're going to only have kind of a half a circulation moving forward because of the changing nature of the atmosphere. But what's happening is that upper level wind that's pushing the dry air in here is also causing flow over top, well aloft, and then at the surface you can see the winds coming like this. So that's what's causing these tornadoes to spin up, and because this is so strong, we're getting very strong tornadoes, exceptionally strong tornadoes for a tropical system. Whenever you see the purples there, that's a particularly dangerous situation. So we're going to see that in this band over here by the West Coast. So it's all beginning. It's all underway now across the state of Florida. Nobody should think, okay, we've got time. This is the beginning of it here, moving over Fort Myers. There you see the tornado warnings up there in Highland County around Lake Placid. Beware there. The one to the northeast of Lake Okeechobee, heading up west of Fort Pierce, up along the turnpike there. Beware. So all over the state of Florida. Okay, here's the cone, and the estimate is 125-mile-an-hour wind. When it says PM here, it means 8 p.m. Eastern time nominally. So the point is, though, that the storm may be their Category 3, but it's getting much, much bigger. So it's unraveling. So that's why we have storm surge threat all the way down the coast here. And when we look at the computer models, as I said, I want everybody in the Tampa Bay area to pay attention. There's the European model directly over the mouth of Tampa Bay. Some are down here a little farther to the south, down closer to Sarasota and Bradenton. But this is the threat zone for the center, but then the storm surge is underneath. What happens if it were to go right into Tampa Bay? Well, what would happen is we would have water pushed up into old Tampa Bay. That's kind of to the left of downtown first. And then as the storm went past, it would come back around and go into Hillsborough Bay, Hillsborough County, and so forth. And then the beaches would eventually get from the northwest wind. So it would just be different if it went directly over the Sunshine Skyway Bridge and into Tampa Bay than if it went to the south or if it went to the north. It doesn't in any way take the hurricane threat off of Tampa Bay. And remember, the hurricane threat is not just storm surge, it's tornadoes and extreme winds being that close to the eye. When we look at the uncertainty, look at the uncertainty cluster. Again, it's kind of to the north side of the cone. So we don't want anybody anywhere in that zone where you have already evacuated, you're already planning for a severe storm to come your way, to kind of let up at all because you saw something on social media, you heard some kind of rumor. I'm not saying that Tampa Bay is going to get the worst storm surge possible. I'm still saying that we don't know. So, and we're not going to know until almost landfall. Here's where the hurricane force winds are forecast to be at landfall. This is nominally about midnight tonight. Could be a little before, could be a little after. Hurricane force gusts down to Fort Myers. This is when the storm surge is going to come in. It's going to come in more or less at landfall. So late this evening into the early morning hours, that's maximum storm surge on this southwest coast. Then when we look wide here, look how large the area is, essentially the entire state of Florida, maybe the Miami area out of it, although tropical storm force gusts, this is tropical storm force winds here, tropical storm force gusts are forecast for the entire state of Florida, including the Keys, Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach County, and so forth. But this is going to be in bands down here with the strong bands coming through with maybe tornadoes. Then when we get up to the northern part of the state, we're talking about a whole different continuous rain flooding threat. Talk about that in a second. At about 10 in the morning, nominally is their forecast. The center moves offshore in around Brevard County with the strong